Hello, in this video I will guide you through the process of assembling of balaclava with open back. So you have printed your pattern, you have cut out your main fabric, which is grid fleece, and you have gathered all the supplies which are listed on each pattern, the size, the length of and the width of all the supplies you would need. I will just briefly talk about marking. So you would want to mark through the cross points on the pattern piece. You would want to mark on the outside of the fabric because we are going to have the seam allowances left on outside. So here are those marks, and the little notch marks on the edges you would want to mark, and perfectly you would want also to cut small incisions, like 1-2 millimeters, really not more, because our seam allowance is here not big. So just cut those, because if you just mark them with chalk or soap, they might disappear during the assembly process, and then it would be harder to remark them. So here we have everything, the threads you need. We will start with threads color black, same color as the elastic we are going to use, and hook and loop, whatever color you are using, use that color first. So first I'll connect the elastic ends. I pin them, you don't have to pin them. Seam allowance here is 5 millimeters. I recommend starting and stopping your seam a few stitches away from the edge, so that when you cut the thread, there is no thread clippings sticking out. Basically, if you start just inside, far away from the edge, you will never have this little thread sticking out that you cannot quite cut out. So after I've connected the elastic, I do also cut it. Let me center it. Yes. So I cut the corners, not exactly, a little bit away from the seam itself. So I leave here a little bit, and this is another corner as well. And then I do also cut out in following way. I cut out the center to avoid the bulk of the elastic in the center. Here is how it looks. Let me clip the threads as well. And then I open seam allowance. This is nitpicky detail, but that's why you're getting instructions from Functional Clothing Lab, because nitpicky details is something you can find here. So, and then what I do, I burn a little bit, especially near the edges, but I opened it so that upon burning, they don't stick together. So I opened it and a little bit burned, but don't burn too much, because that part could be scratching against your face, because it's elastic that would be applied around the face. So that's the end look of the elastic that would be applied in that way. So we cut out the edges here so that we don't have a lot of the elastic seam allowance sticking out in the finished seam, and we cut out here in the center to avoid the bulk of 2 layers of elastic here. Same I'll do with the second one, obviously. Here elastics are ready. Now I will attach Velcro, hook and loop. So we attach the hook on the main body of the balaclava and loop on the tab, for obvious reasons, that if you close the balaclava not fully, so that the part that is on the tab is not scratching against your skin there. So here I have marked location for the hook piece. I'm just going to stitch it all the way around. One detail that I almost forgot. If you want, you can also add a little piece of webbing or gross grain ribbon in this part near the center of the tab, under the loop part, so that it's easier for you to pull from. And I'm going to get a piece somewhere now. So first thing I found was just this little piece of webbing fold it in two, and put it under the loop part. While going over this little tab piece, I go back and forth one more time so that when pulling from it, it doesn't come out. Clip the threads. Now this piece is ready, it will be folded in two and attached. Yeah, as you noticed, I had a piece made of two pieces, even though your pattern is made from one. I just used scraps, so don't pay too much attention to that. Let's attach the loop, the hook piece, which goes and gets attached to the main piece in the marked location, which is here, around these 4 dots. That's done. And the last bit, just to make elastics ready for assembly. So here we have a seam, and now we will mark, we will fold it in two, with seam being on one end, and we will mark another end with a pin, or you can mark with a chalk, or any ways that will serve the purpose. We marked half way from the seam that connected the elastic, and then we will fold together the mark and the seam, and mark quarters. Essentially, what we are doing, we are having marks every quarter of the elastic length, and that will allow us to put elastic correctly with even tension along whole elastic, because we also have quarter marks along the face edge and along the back edge of the balaclava. So we do it with both elastics, back elastic and for the face elastic as well. Do the marks and change the thread color for the main color of whatever fabric you're using. So we change the thread color, and now we are ready for main part. And the first thing we will do is we will close all the darts. What I call darts are this and the center back parts. So let's start with the easiest one, the center back. Just fold it flat. Start from wherever you feel more comfortable, either from the edge or from the mark. Mark should be on the fold. It is totally symmetric, so it's easy. 4mm seam allowance. Here we go. Tuck at the end. Just be careful that the edge that is underneath, that you don't clearly see, have not gone too far, and it's not like just 1 millimeter away from the seam. It needs to be at least 3 millimeters in order to hold. I know the seam allowances I put here are small, but we can't use huge because they are on outside. It wouldn't look nice, and it's not exactly necessary with power grid fleece. If you're using another fabric, however, see for yourself if this fabric is more prone for how it's called, fraying, increase seam allowances. On the patterns you see exactly where the seam lines are and the width of the seam allowances, therefore you can easily increase seam allowance. Let's finish this seam. At the very end, try to go as smooth as possible because these parts are going to lay flat against your skull, which is globular, which is spherical in shape, so we want nice and smooth seams. Try to get to the last bit, for the needle to be at the very edge of the fabric when you finish the seam. That's what I'm talking about, like very close, but it doesn't necessarily have to go over the edge, because once you go over the edge, when you're back tacking, you might just lose it and it might go over it. So It's okay if it's a little, if there is a little distance. So next two seams are same in a way. They are just not exactly symmetric because you are going to be attaching somewhat curved, not somewhat curved edge to the straight edge, but with flexibility of grid fleece is not a problem. So on the straight side, on the face side, we have one notch which you do need to align with the very end of the curved piece. So that's why the notch is there, for you to know where to end this seam. Most often I do start from the marked point, not from the edge, because here edge is more tricky to tack at the beginning of the seam, so it's easier to get it at the end of the seam. So what I do, I just fold first few centimeters together so that they are aligned, find the center mark, not the center, find the mark, and then make it so that it sits, here it is, it's not very visible, but I see it. It sits on the fold, and just start from the mark. You can slowly get your needle all the way to almost touch the fabric to see where the needle is going to hit, so that you are close to the edge. Same here, seam allowance 4 millimeters, just like all over the project. So grid fleece, it tends to stretch. That's why the mark here is quite useful actually. Both as a nipped mark, because on this, when you are seeing from the backside, you obviously wouldn't see a drawn mark. So just align the edges, align the ending points, and slightly stretch, not slightly stretch, you actually shouldn't worry if you slightly stretch the fabric during the sewing process. It's not like other jerseys that will get wavy. The grid fleece has a lot of thickness, so this will absorb some amount of extra thread, and it actually will give a little more flexibility to the end product. Because if the seam is a little longer, so it has some more stretch. Yeah, it's not going to be a problem. That's why this is an amazing project because you can sew grid fleece, which is a knit fabric, but you don't need to use serger to do it, and it still works great. You will see for yourself. Let's go and finish it. Approaching the very end here, aim for ending the seam right at the corner. The seam should just, and there you can also see on the pattern where the seam line is on this piece, and that's where it ends. You see? Ooh, here it went a little bit off my width of the seam allowance, but it's okay. But what's important is for it to end in the corner and then on the edge of the garment. Because basically this will become one face edge, so we need it to be ready for that. Just do the same on another side. Same here. So here we have three-dimensional shape. If you want, you can go on and iron. I will also clip the threads at this moment in the beginnings of the seams. You can actually already try it on somewhat and see if, and actually yes, that would be a good point to see if you need an adjustment. Just don't stretch it too much so that also it's not a problem, but don't stretch it for the sake of understanding if the size is correct for you. So it's supposed to sit in the middle of the forehead or lower on kind of like above the eyebrows. See, it's of course, because it was made based on my head, it sits quite well on it. Head shapes are vastly different one from another could be, so don't be upset if it doesn't fit your head so perfectly. You of course can adjust it, and that's the beauty of also of the seams that are done with the straight stitch machine. It's easy to undo those seams and to take more fabric if needed. It's easy to adjust, so you can kind of hold it around your face and feel like, how does it sit? Does it sit well? Is it too tight? Of course, if it's too tight, you have to cut new, just size up. But you can still finish the project and give it to your friend with smaller head. So this is a time when you can adjust things. I will go on and connect. Next step, I will connect the neck seam. Super easy as previous ones. Just align those together, 4mm seam allowance. Nothing special in this seam. It's the conventional one. All right. I also clip a bit seam allowance here because we will be applying elastic in the next step, so that there is a little less bulk under the elastic itself, both in the start and in the end of this seam. I'll clip, and I'll actually clip around the center back seam as well, for the same reason. Again, try it on, just for fun. Oop. So you can almost, your project is almost done. Almost ready. Next we prep the back tab. Basically just fold it in two and connect the sides, again 4mm seam allowance, and turn inside out. You can actually, you don't have to do it inside out. It depends on what kind of finish you would like. Like if you like the edge to be more like that, more like clean, but a little bit thicker, or you can leave it on the outside. I actually will do both, one edge one way and another, so you can see both. If you are leaving seam allowances on inside, before turning inside out, cut out the corners so that there is again less bulk inside the corner. I'll just use this special tool for the corners to push the corners to lie a little bit more straight. You can use just something like blunt pencil, unsharpened pencil will also do the job. I also actually will cut out the seam allowance next to the edge, again for the sake of less bulk. I will now connect the other side. When you connect it on outside, use any seam allowance. That's not important anymore. Right, so that's how it looks if it's on outside. Also fine and a little thinner. It's just a matter of your preference. So yeah, and then we baste the tab, or how to show you. So there are notches. So on one side we have a hook, and on another side we have notches, and on all sizes there are 3 notches. 2 notches are for aligning it with the tab, and 1 notch is the quarter mark of the back edge. On the pattern you will see it, the quarter mark is marked in red, if I'm correct. Even if you're printed on black and white printer, you still will see it as another color because it will be grayish, not black like other marks. So just remember which one is which, because for different sizes they are located in different places. Now, with the loop facing you, align your tab between the notches. Place your tab between the notches and baste. Baste means attaching something temporarily. In this case, it means we will attach it with 2-3mm seam allowance just to hold it in place before we attach the edging elastic, which will be attached further away from the edge. Therefore, the basting will not be visible. It's just a temporary stitching to help us keep everything in place. Here are my marks. Of course, if you made seams on outside, be sure to align notches with your seam lines, because the notches have been made for the version that has seam allowances on the inside. Basting can also happen with longer stitching. it doesn't matter in this case because it's tiny piece, but if you are basting longer pieces, generally speaking, it's just faster to baste with the longest stitch length possible, and you also don't have to back tack when you're basting. I just did because my sewing machine does it automatically. So next step is attachment of elastic of face edge elastic and back edge elastic. We made quarter marks on both of those, and we have quarter marks on the balaclava piece itself. Some marks, like let's start with the back edge. One of the mark is the seam itself, is the center back. And we can align, most often I align the sewn seam on the elastic itself. There, although no. And most of the time I would align one of the pinned marks there, so that the sewn seam is aligned with some other notch and it doesn't create bulk, because here we already have bulk of the seam allowance of the center back seam. So if we add elastic there as well, there would be too much. So you align your pinned part with the piece you are sorry. So you align the pin. So you align the pin, in this case, with the seam itself. Then you fold over. You can remove the pin. And if you're using pins, you just right away pin it in place. That's why I prefer pins, because they are anyway useful here. But if you're using clips or some other way, use whatever suits you. Next, just go along along the edge, not yet pinning anything. We just need to pin quarter marks first. So next one, in this case, is the seam itself, and we align it with a little notch on the fabric. Same thing, we align them, we fold it over the elastic. I take the pin because this one didn't have it. And of course, use the pin elastic on the outside, on the side where you would be sewing from. Just keep going along the edge. Oh, next one is a center seam on the neck, center front seam on the neck, and the pin on the elastic. Here, maybe like this. So I align them, I remove the pin, I fold over, because the pin actually doesn't allow me to fold over, and while holding this whole thing together, I pin it. Now let me show it one more time in the other view. Okay, so we keep going along the edge. Here, where is our little notch? Here it is. So little notch. Remove the pin, fold over, pin in place. And so now what we have is elastic pinned in 4 places in quarters along the balaclava. You might notice here already that elastic seems to be shorter than the edge, but that's the thing. Everything has been calculated correctly, and it is the same length, but the fabric, because it's have been cut, is already have relaxed. And that's why we need all the notches and quarter marks, so you are not getting confused as to is it enough stretch there, is it too much or anything. So basically you can actually already start sewing that way if you feel confident. But what I do, I actually do that because I have done it many times and I don't need. But you might want to just stretch, just hold two adjacent pinned parts, stretch it so that everything is stretched to the same length. Just hold one piece somewhere roughly in the middle and pin it, so that when you're sewing you have shorter parts and pinned parts, and they are more manageable. The fold over elastic is good at folding over while sewing, so but you can also you can take and do it once more. You can hold two adjacent pins and put one more in the center. You can put as many as you need to feel confident while sewing. So let me do it one more time. Along this edge, I hold it, together and I pin it. Yeah, this edge is a little more tricky because it's long and it's concave. So now I will stitch the back edge elastic. Start at any pin you feel comfortable with. Maybe I'll start next to the back edge because this is the least visible place, and the back tacks would not be so noticeable. Anyway, black on black is not so noticeable. Along the bottom edge, all around the neck, you actually need no gathering. So basically, if you notice that your elastic is for some reason shorter and it's going to gather the part, something is wrong. It has been calculated so that it doesn't do that, because it's not very comfortable to have a little bit of elastic here. It should lie flat here. Without further ado, here, since we started next to the hook part, I sometimes, if my elastic is wide enough, I would go over the edge of the hook. It's not so important, but just to have less possibility of little corner being sharp somewhere, even though it's not against the skin, but still, you never know. You can also slightly stretch while sewing both elastic and the fabric. It's not going to do any wavy finish on it. It's just, again, going to give a little more stretch to the finished object. Not a little bit more stretch, but a little bit more possibility of stretching if need be. Even though the... actually, there are some cases when you want to do some weirder things with this balaclava, and the stretch along the edge might be necessary, so not to break the stitching itself. So not to break, just give a little more stretch while sewing, so it will have this stretch while being used. Again, when going over the back tab, I will go back and forth along both edges here, so that when it's pulled there is extra reinforcement and it doesn't put too much load on just one line of stitching. Now just check if it got caught all on the back side as well. With fold over elastic I almost never had misses. I mean, just check, just in case something had been missed. So now the back elastic have been applied, and the last piece we need to do is to add face edge elastic, which is just the same operation as we did. There are quarter marks here, and this in the center front, and another one is the center bottom of the face. One detail: the seam on the elastic itself, I don't put it neither at the center of the forehead, because it would be just here. It would be pressing against forehead as well, and if you are going to wear helmet over it, it might be in the wrong spot. So I would put it in the quarter mark, which is still around the face, but whole this edge is around the face. So at least one of these points is better than here or here. Here is the most sensitive part, actually. I think the skin here is more sensitive to some pressure or some discomfort. So place it, I think place it here is better. So I'll just do it in a quick mode without comments. Okay, now one comment. Here around the face, you might notice, again, you might feel like, oh, the elastic is so much shorter than the edge. No, don't be worried. Around the face, you need that more. It has been calculated. Trust my calculations. And the fabric has relaxed since you cut it. The edge doesn't have all the elasticity, so it's naturally get longer, but it's going to be fine. Just stretch the elastic, put the layer of the fabric between folded elastic, keep stretching a bit, just keep tension, not stretch, but some tension, and stretch as well for the same reasons that I was telling you earlier, and just go. Yeah, be careful when you're going around the end of this seam, because again it's concave part and it tends to slip away. Just be careful when you're putting it between two layers of the elastic. Just hold it with your finger around that point until you passed over it, and then just continue. Be sure that the fabric doesn't fold on itself inside the elastic, but you can feel it with your fingers here. Just straighten it if you feel, and of course you need the edge of the fabric to be as close as possible to the fold of the elastic so that it holds securely. Again, this treacherous point, hold it really well, fold elastic over it, feel that it's all inside, and go. Okay. Nip the threads, and it's ready! Yee-hoo! All eyes on me. I'm going to put it on. I would like to iron it, but let's just put it on fresh off the sewing machine. Here it is, your very own balaclava. And you see, after applying of elastic, the edge sits lower on the eyebrows. Here you see what I was telling you, that this edge doesn't need to be gathered. It needs really to lie flat because it lies really close to the neck. So the closer, the top, you can adjust, you can close it loosely, you can really stretch and close it closely. I don't know what you're seeing now. So here it is, ready. Of course, again, it might not fit you perfectly. Your neck might be much bigger and more muscular than mine. But the beauty of it now is you know how to assemble it. You know, like, oh, I wish here to have 2 centimeters. It's extremely easy to add 2 centimeters there to the pattern. Or I wish this would cover longer. Like, just add it on the pattern, and you don't need any pattern knowledge to adjust this one. Once you have the sample, it's extremely easy to make adjustment and make it perfect for your head. If you have any questions, always be free to reach out to me through Instagram, or you will find my email on my website, always listed. I hope you enjoyed the project, and I'm always open to hear also what kind of modifications you will make for yourself. And lastly, this is not the last balaclava that I'm going to release. There is one more version, the winter version of this balaclava, which has more coverage on the back of the head, and there is even a version that covers it fully, and there is more coverage on the neck, and the closure goes all the way until here to close the back neck as well. And there is a little more coverage around the face, so this line is here, and there is even versions that covers the chin. And that version also has visor, small visor, and a little additional panels of the windproof fabric, like very light, like these nylons that we use for windbreakers, just to close the ears even more from the wind. All these features have been added because a person who bikes in the winter asked me, and I found that this is a great version, and I have been wearing it a lot myself. So if you are happy with this, let me know, and I'll try to make it faster, the next version of more cloth balaclava, but I'm releasing this project in May of 2023. So until the time you need winter balaclava, I have time to prepare it, but just let me know if those modifications are of interest for you, maker. Bye.